Hi, everyone. Welcome to SONOR Family. I'm your host, Zack Stewart, coming to you, as always, from my drum studio in Nashville, Tennessee. And I'm very excited today to be joined by a friend of mine and fellow Sonor artist, Andrés Forero. Andrés, how you doing, man?
I'm great, Zach. Thanks so much for having me, and sorry for all the technical stuff.
That's all right, man. I appreciate it. And, I think it's amazing everybody's learning curve and all this in like the last 4 months, whether it be from these kind of, digital interviews to sessions and everything else.
Oh yeah, I mean it's been incredible to learn how to cope with all of this stuff, doing master classes, teaching, and even recording and doing recording projects. You know, you sort of wonder how we didn't know about this before, or how it wasn't available before, in a sense. And it's really wonderful that it is.
Yeah, for sure. Well, before we get kind of talking about some Sonar drums, for the people at home, you and I met a few years back. It was a nice event, but for an unfortunate reason, it was the Joe Hibbs Memorial. And again, for people who may not be aware of who Joe Hibbs is, first off, go Google Joe. He was just a legend in the drum industry. Worked artist relations, product development for numerous companies. A lot of people might know him from his work with Mapex, but towards the end of his life, he was working as a U.S. artist relations guy for Sonar Drums. And when he unfortunately passed away suddenly, the guys at KHS a few months later put together a really nice memorial, and they had a lot of different drummers play. And I saw your name on the list when I got the email about playing on it, and who wanted to do what tune. And I'd heard your name before, but I wasn't familiar with your playing. And just to give you a little backstory of what I experienced, the event was at a kind of small room, or small, like underneath a club. They had a second room they had. And I remember in the sound check, it was just loud because they were obviously expecting a lot of people to be in there, and there was no one in there yet. But I remember when you got up and ran your tune, which I can't remember what song it was.
Kiss.
Yes, yeah, that was it. Yeah, okay. And I remember you started playing, and I was, everybody had been up in sound check. I think I was talking to somebody, and honestly, it really caught my attention. And it was because it sounded like the record. And I don't mean necessarily, I don't know, I wasn't keeping track of what notes you were playing, but your sound up there, even in that situation, was something unique. And then when I went and looked you up and saw your background with being involved with musicals and all that, I was kind of like, well, maybe that's it. Most of us who are up there either work either in the session world or live only, and you work, which is very unique in the Broadway world.
Yeah, that was a really special time, and thank you for saying that. It was hard to get through that for many reasons. It was emotional. I had a really great relationship with Joe, even though it was brief. It felt like I'd known him forever, and he touched my life and my family's life instantly. But the interesting story behind that particular tune, they had given us some options to choose some music,
Mm-hmm.
and I just I've always loved Prince. One of the things about Prince that's special to me is that he plays guitar, and guitar is my first instrument. So I've always gravitated towards the Princes, the Stevie Wonders, and the folks that play multiple instruments have always interested me and fascinated me. And to be honest, I never really started studying drummers until later in my adult life. I was always into saxophone players, trumpet players, bass players, guitar players, piano players, etc. So I picked that tune, and when we ran it, I've always heard that tune differently than it was actually recorded. Not the part itself, but the tempo. And I figured, I've always thought you can't ever recreate something that's already perfect.
Yeah.
And so because I felt it different, there wasn't enough time to talk to anyone and say, hey, can we slow this down? Can we make a change? And so I took sort of a risky chance. And I think I had alluded to the MD that, hey, I want to do this a little bit slower.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, we'll work on it later or something like that. And it never quite happened. So that performance, you're literally on stage with, you know, 3 other drum kits, and they're some of the most important drummers of our time are swapping back and forth, you know, getting on stage, getting off stage. And I didn't even have time to process all of that.
Yeah.
So when I got on stage, I was just like, I didn't even think, because I counted the tune off. I didn't think to myself, oh crap, I need to count it in the right tempo. So I counted it in my tempo. And there's a video floating around about it. And I started it, and you know, drummers in a lot of way have sort of the ultimate control when it comes to stuff, you know, when it comes to those tempo things. And in that moment, it wasn't about that. I just felt it, and I was in that moment, and I wasn't even thinking, and I counted it off really slow. And I remember starting to play it, and the MD looked at me like, you know, and then everyone turned around and looked at me like, speed it up. And I was like, I don't think so. And if you watch the video, you can actually see the morph in people's faces, like, yeah, you know,
Yeah.
this works. And I was just so grateful that no one got upset about it. And it truly was one of those moments where you think to yourself, and it's happened to me before, for good reasons and bad reasons, you know, where you make a decision, you stick to it because you follow your gut. And this was one of those good ones where, you know, I'm grateful that I did that and I followed through with it. And at the end of the day, you know, if it feels good, then hopefully it'll feel good for other people. And that was sort of that moment. But I remember that distinctly. You know, I remember the feelings I had before it, all the emotions, and then all the emotions after it. And
Yeah.
that was a special time for a very unique and special person that I love and miss dearly. So
Yeah. No, it was, and it was great. You know, just the proper send off for him. You know, and I think even that of the selections of tunes. You know, considering the list of drummers who played on it, it wasn't all just insane drum music. It was a complete opposite. You know, Joe liked songs that had groove and a backbeat, and that's what everybody played and played well. So yeah, it's definitely a great event. Um, well, obviously, we're all in the midst of this insane time in life with this pandemic and quarantine and all that. What has, you know, I know you've been quite busy as we've been communicating, trying to get all this lined up. What have things been looking like for you during all this?
well, I'll give you the abbreviated version of it now that we're sort of past the worst of it. Unfortunately, me and my immediate family, my wife and 3 kids, got COVID, and we
Oh,
have not been public about it until now.
okay.
And we were very, very, very sick, and we tried our hardest to um, keep the kids from being sick. And that was, I think, the emotional part of it, the emotional stress when you have 3 little children, where you want to protect them and keep them from getting sick. That is the hardest part, you know. And I'm fairly certain that I'm the one that got it and then passed it on to my wife.
Yeah.
She got very, very sick, and she had to move down here into my studio. And her illness accelerated far faster, far quicker, excuse me, than mine did. Mine, I really was resisting, but I was still quite sick, but I wouldn't get as sick or worse until much later, which was a good thing because I was able to take care of everyone through feeling really awful. And you know, the first 30 days were really difficult because it's, you know, exhaustion, and I was running down here to the basement, running to each of the rooms. The kids were all isolated in their own rooms. Everyone had masks and gloves on, and literally there were dishes to care for everyone separately, and everything was separate, so no one would we would protect the kids
Yeah.
above all. And no matter how much we tried to protect them, they each got sick. And emotionally, it was one of the most difficult times of my life, just because I felt like I failed them and I got them sick. And, you know, God forbid, they need to go. We did not want to go to a hospital. That was
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
most
Yeah.
important thing, was we need to stay out of the hospital, because I've always been, sort of squeamish about hospitals, even though I spent quite a bit of time there. But it just, I didn't want my kids to be in that environment. And luckily, we were surrounded by some really wonderful friends that are doctors, and we were under the care of a wonderful local doctor who's our family doctor, that took control right away of everyone, put us on medication, and guided us through all of it as best she could, with the ups and downs of it. Because, to be honest with you, the first 30 days were rough, but the next 30 were really, really unbearable for me.
Mm.
And everyone is thankfully now COVID free. But you can imagine, it was very difficult for us to not be able to hug or kiss our kids,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
for all that time. We're a very affectionate family, and to not be able to be close to them was killing us. And I still have residual headache issues from it. It's the strangest virus. I don't know how else to explain it, other than it does the strangest things to your mind and to your body. And so I've been dealing with the headaches, and it's treatable, but there's just nothing they can do about it. It's one of those things that's going to run its course. And but other than that, we're all great, thank God. So it's
Yeah.
been
Yeah.
quite
Absolutely.
difficult.
Yeah. Well, man, I'm so happy to hear you guys are getting on the other side of that. I had no idea. That's you know, hopefully for anybody who's watching this and has any doubts on it, like it's serious business.
It is, yeah. And I I lost a ton of weight too. I just, you don't have an appetite. So in, I don't know, 60 days, I mean, I dropped about 25 pounds. I mean, I got very, very skinny.
Mm.
And it messes with your appetite. It messes with everything. And it's something that hopefully people are taking serious, and it's not over.
Yeah.
This thing is very serious, and now it's affecting younger people, and no one is safe from it. And so it's even more important time, critical to be conscious of the people around you. And like they say, it's not just about us. It's really
Yeah.
the masks and all that for other people. And it doesn't take anything to put a mask on. Is it annoying? Of course, but who cares if you're going to save yourself or save someone else? It takes
No.
2 seconds to do that. So
Yeah.
anyway.
Absolutely. Well, have you, been able to kind of get back? I see you're sitting behind your kit there, your studio. Have been energy back enough to play? Or been doing any sessions or anything?
Yeah, I just did a session for the Disney premiere of Hamilton. It's for the Hamilton Company. I don't know what will come of it. There were other sessions that I did as well, and the last 3 weeks have been me getting back at the kit and trying to really regain some dexterity and some vocabulary again. Um, and it's been difficult. It's been really difficult, because you lose, have your breath is the most precious thing. Now you
Hmm.
realize, after you've lost, you know 90 days of your life, in a sense, where you couldn't breathe.
Yeah.
I was One of the hardest things that we dealt with was just being out of breath, just moving from the bedroom to the kitchen. Like, you have to just lean on a counter, because you can't breathe and you get dizzy. And so all those things taken into account, you're so much more grateful for the simple things that we take for granted. But so it's been a process of getting back down here, warming up. I have a whole nother respect for this instrument,
Yeah.
because it's such a physical instrument. Like, I play uh, guitar every day, and the guitar, it's stressful as well, and strenuous, but nothing like the drums. So, I mean, I can play the guitar all day if I want. The drums, I have to go in little increments. I think the most I've actually played is on and off a recording session I just did in the last 48 hours. We were going at it all day, and I had to stop and start and stop. And you realize, it is a lot of work. and you're responsible for four limbs, that have
Yeah.
to be responsible to each other as well. So yeah, I have a whole nother appreciation for the drums now, and a deeper respect for it. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's not easy.
Um, Going back to something I was mentioning earlier, and I think, I mean, honestly, you're be the person to give an opinion on this. Do you find your approach to playing when you are doing when you're with Hamilton and you guys are doing a live show? Do you find there's a different approach versus if you are at home in your studio, or like I was saying, if you're at home doing, or sorry, out doing a gig? Because it seems like there's elements of both. There's elements of a live gig, but then there's elements of being somewhat isolated because obviously, you guys are all in different areas, I believe, in your setup there for the live show. Do you think that kind of playing in the pit is almost another set of dynamics or skill that's different than studio or live?
Yeah, it's probably one of the best questions I've ever been asked in any interview. No one's ever asked me that. It's brilliant because a Broadway musician is all of those things in one. So you're a studio musician, you're a live musician, and you're creating parts. So in a sense, depending on where you are in the show's production, you orchestrate as well. And there's a choreography to it. And so I think one of the reasons why theater or pit musicians are so often used on a multitude of different styles of music is that most of them, I mean, all you have to be a sight reader. That's you have
Yeah.
to have sight reading skills at your highest level to be in that medium. You will not get a Broadway show if you can't sight read. There are some folks that probably have done it. Personally don't know of anyone, but I'm sure that there are uh, through the years. But that's one component. The next component is you have to have your studio skills together, which means you have to know how to approach the instrument, how to strike the instrument, because a studio musician doesn't strike an instrument the way a live musician will strike an instrument, because the
Yeah.
the energy is different, the intention is different. Um, but at the same time, it's contradictory. The intentions are similar with all of those components. Whereas you want to give your best performance, you want to leave it, sort of leave it there and play like it's the last time you're ever going to play. Um, and with a Broadway show, it's 8 shows a week. And, there's 2 shows on Saturday, 2 shows on Wednesday, a show on Sunday, you're off on Monday, and they're 3 hours long. So there's no better place to take a drum or a piece of hardware and test it out.
Yeah.
That's where you're going to find out whether this stuff is really built to last. Same
Yeah.
for thrones. If a drum seat or drum throne gets tested, because there's so many different people that sit in that chair, and it's a very important part of the drum kit if you're sitting for 3 hours.
Yeah.
But yeah, the elements of studio and live come into focus instantly when you're doing a Broadway show. And I've been doing studio work for the past 15 years, like regularly as I have a Broadway stuff, but they really are very symbiotic. So it's been a wonderful thing to be a part of that. And, I've been playing to a click. That's the other thing, is that you have to,
Yeah. Yeah.
play to a click. You have to understand the click, respect it. And you also have to follow a conductor. I have 4 TV screens in the pit where you follow the conductor. You also have a screen for the stage. So a lot of it there, I feel that in Hamilton and when I did in the Heights, there is a creative component to it. There is a bit of a, a jazzy atmosphere. And by that, I mean, it's sort of a silly way of saying that you do have space to create, and you do have a space to be creative and to do all the
Yeah.
things that you want to do. Um, but you have to stay within, certain guidelines with
Yeah.
respect to that. So
Yeah. No, like I said, man, there's quite a few things out there with you. Like I know some of the other companies, like I think Vic Firth did one. Then of course your clinic at PASIC, which people can look up clips from on YouTube. I think it's something that's very foreign to a lot of people, and again, even foreign to me as far as actually performing in that world. But looking at it, you do see that it's really a bunch of skill sets coming together in one time. So I find it extremely fascinating. But going back to what you were talking about with the instruments, a few years ago you came over with the Sonar drums, and I guess for you, what was something, I don't know if you had impressions of the drums before. Like I always say, for me, I grew up seeing the drums around, and when time came in my career that, and their situation as well in the United States, it made sense to move over there. I did. What was it, I guess, about Sonar and then having an instrument with that sound and that feel that kind of, I guess, stuck out to you initially?
I'll be really honest with you. I had been a Yamaha artist for 18 years.
Yeah.
When I go somewhere, it's like a family thing. I was telling Mark Bennett yesterday that for me, there's a lot of companies making great stuff. But to me, it's about the people that stand behind the gear, because at the end of the day, a drum's a drum, but a human being is someone that can be your friend, and you can learn from them and have a dialogue with them. So I've always been kind of strange with endorsements and with companies and all that stuff, because folks ask me like, "Oh, what do you love about the drums?" And I say, "Well, I love the people." That's the first thing I always say.
Yeah.
And that's the first thing I check out. I don't necessarily look at the sound of the drums right away, because it's just truth that most of the companies are making really wonderful gear. A lot of it is, Max Roach always said to me, he's like, you could play a box and make it sound good if it's coming from your heart.
Yeah.
So a lot of that technique and tone is coming from our hands. It's very much like the guitar. People talk about chasing tone and how tone is so important, and a lot of times overlooked is the tone is in our hands and in our feet. We find the resistance in our limbs, and those are the things that create our sound. And so the people, for me, in a sense, with the company are first, and then eventually you find the sound that you like, within the different variations of drums that they put out. But Steve Smith was was the main reason why I went to Sonar.
Okay.
He actually brought me over, and yeah, I mean, what can you say? You listen to him play, and you can listen to a handful of wonderful Sonar drummers, that play, and they all have this wonderful sound. Whether it's the jazz guys, it's all very musical, and it's a very musical instrument. But the thing, I will say this, and I told Joe Hibbs this, and he I think my relationship with Joe started off kind of crazy, a little rocky, because he asked me, he's like, "Well, what drums do you want?" I'm like, "Oh, I don't want any drums. I bought up my own drums. I went and got stuff from the 60s, 70s, and all the way up to the SQ2." And I was like, I didn't want my relationship to be predicated on getting something from someone.
Yeah.
I wanted to do my homework and really figure out where this stuff came from, because Sonar is the oldest company out there, at least one of two of the oldest companies. So I wanted to see what that was about. And so I set out on a very deep journey, figuring out the hardware, figuring out the shell construction, and how these drums work in all of their different options. And so I ended up with, a bunch of different kits, starting from the 60s, like I said, and working my way into the SQ2. And then he asked me at one point, he's like, "Well, what's the sound that you're looking for?" And I said, "Well, I'm looking to sort of find my voice within the drum kit, but I need to spend time with the drums to do that." And I did that. I took a bunch of time to figure out the sound. But to get drums into the theater, I literally had 12 hours. Because I actually signed on with Sonar quickly. It was like one of those things. Joe had just moved over from Apex, where he was doing double duty, and he was charged with all of this work, and I
Yeah.
was one of many different people that he had on a roster of people to look after, and he didn't know anything about me, and I knew nothing about him at the time, but he took care of everything that I needed. So it was kind of a weird start to the relationship, but he had never had that experience. Like people are usually just sending lists of gazillion
Yeah.
things that they want. Of course, later on, Sonar made me a beautiful drum set, which I'm sitting behind now, and you can
Yeah. Yeah.
customize it and everything. But yeah, so it took me some time to really find that voice. But the one thing that sticks out to me really quickly is that I told Joe, I said, these drums don't allow you to BS. That
Yeah.
somehow they when you play them, if you're not playing them correctly, they really won't sound that great. Like you have to actually strike the drum properly. And I know that sounds kind of hokey, but there's something so musical about the drum that if you pound it, you're not going to get a ton of tone. I'm sure there's ways to do that, but I never found that. I found that I had to relearn how to play the drums, relearn how to hit them in a sense,
Good.
to strike them, more musically. And it's only
Yeah.
made me a better musician, I think, and it's kind of weird to hear, like I really believe that, and I believe it with the older drums as much as the newer ones. The older drums are even more finicky. You have to
Yeah.
really find the sweet spot while you're tuning them. You have to know how to tune. And I went with the slotted key, tuning.
Oh, nice.
Uh,
Throwback. Yeah.
yeah, and because all of my other drums were that way, the old ones that I got, everything was slotted key. So I'm like, well, if it worked then, it should work now, And I got
Yeah.
used to the tuning, and there is a difference. I think there is a difference in how how we feel the turn in tuning, and that's really getting sort of into the minutia of it all. But yeah, there's a lot that goes to these drums, knowing how to tune them, and certainly knowing how to play them. So
Yeah. No, man, I will. First off, I love that this is something that I'm always preaching to people, especially younger players and younger people in this business is, you had a company who you were interested in and you actually invested energy in getting the drums. You literally invested money in purchasing the drums. Like, this idea that people have of, well, and we all know there are very famous drummers who have that mentality. We're not going to name any names, who probably, if they look to change companies, they just call and just say, what would you give me? And whoever gives you the most is who you're going to go with, but just like you were talking about Steve Smith, I had a similar interview with Steve not long ago. And we were discussing the same thing. He purchased his first few kits, and it was just kind of, we'll see where it goes. I mean, that was the whole world of artist relations was much different back then, but there was still, you like the way the drums sound. And I'm a huge Sonar nerd, so I've got a bunch of the old drums as well. And, I think you're right. There is one thing that has remained consistent is that smaller shell diameter. So maybe that's something to what you're talking about, the feel of the drums, because I know for me, it's a different touch. And not that it's like you need a training manual to play them, but it actually allowed me to play more natural. I didn't have to, I felt like if I dropped the weight of my body or my hand, my forearm, whatever, the drum just opened up.
oh yeah, and they do respond because all honesty, for me, in all honesty, that when I play the Broadway show, it is like a rock show because we do hit the drums. They get hit, and but they do react. So it's not like you can't put muscle into them, but you
Mm-hmm.
learn where the drum just says, "Hey, that's
Yeah.
too hard."
Yeah. Yeah.
And all those things are really effective in helping a musician be better at what they do, because at the end of the day, there is a way to strike a cymbal, a way to strike the drum, to pull the sound. My old teacher Justin DeChocho used to say, when you hit the drum, it's like a big pot of soup, and all the good stuff in the soup is down at the bottom, and you want to pull all that stuff to the top. So he said, when you hit the drum, you have to hit it in a certain way to pull the sound and to get that full sound out of the drum. And these drums
Yeah.
are really great at telling you if it's too much or too little or whatever. It's a great. I don't know what or how they do it, and I'm eager to go to Germany, and we've been talking about that for some time to really. And what's wonderful too is that a lot of the people that made some of the drums that I have from the 70s or 60s are still working at that company. I mean, that has to tell you something. Just that is a huge statement, and it's very much the same in California at Fender. There are, I think maybe today there isn't, but there were up to maybe a year or two ago, there were some employees that had been there that made some of the old Fender guitars that I have. That kind of thing speaks volumes to me, and how many companies have that? How many places can you go that say, hey, that lady or that guy made that drum for me? They made the same drum, the same hands touched that drum. So I think that's remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, I've been to the factory once, and I mean, it is, I've only ever seen maybe one other drum manufacturing facility, and it is different. There is the feeling of the people. There's also just the craftsmanship training. Like when I went in there, I remember they had I saw a woodworking shop, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. They had birdhouses and like picture frames. Like if let's say there was a poster, a promo poster, you can see that framed up on the wall. The guys, they encourage people to do woodworking because that's what they're working with is wood. They're making drum shells. They're not just someone who did a 6-week training on the drum shell department and now they're just, okay, I make drum shells, press, boom, next one. These people actually know the material. And the thing that took me back was there was a little wooden card with some writing on it. And, basically, multiple plies, some plies, even though they're all supposed to be the same, they might have a little bit more thickness, might be a little thinner. I mean, it's not perfect. These guys are so experienced that they were making note adjustments of, well, if this one feels thicker, then it might not wrap over as far. So maybe go this length. I mean, like it wasn't just a computer. They hit like print drum shell and there you go. So if nothing else,
Love that.
Yeah. When you see it, and I'm sure you'll get over there whenever the world allows. When you see the process, when you see the people, I mean, it makes you proud to play them, but it also makes you almost like you said, it makes you be like, man, if my job is to play these and make them sound good, then I gotta be good at my job,
Oh yeah.
because the people before me in the steps to manufacture this instrument, they were world class at their job, so I gotta expect the same of myself.
Absolutely. I mean, they sort of are poster childs for the past, present, and future. Like that to me, it's always been that with Sonar. They've got themselves the correct group of people working, making these things, and the correct people talking to the artist, and they listen. That's the other thing. So it's really a very rewarding situation to be in.
Great. Well, what is the kit you've got there at your studio? Is that pretty similar to? I mean, I know the setup used for Hamilton is different than that, but as far as like the components of the kick drum, rack tom, floor toms, like what's kind of standard stuff for you to use on a gig or at home?
Um, it depends on what the session is. Like I did a session for Andrea Bocelli record,
Mm.
and that was a completely different setup. There's a lot of percussion as well for that. And then for Raul Midon, I used we just did his record here, and there were it was 8, 10, 12, and 16 floor tom, 2 snare drums. I because Hamilton has 5 snare drums, I've sort of really in the last 6 years been using multiple snare drums just because it's part of my life now. So it's become essential to have that other sound. I'm just so used to going over to the left and striking another drum, and to my left I have 4 other drums, other snare drums. So but yeah, this is typical. I mean, you can see I have behind me, I have other toms, and you can sort of see the lineage behind me. I have snare drums. I mean, I've spent so much money on old snare drums, in the past. I don't know how many years, it's been 10 years or whatever that I've been collecting snare drums, because snare drums are incredible to me. They're all very different. And so that's sort of where you can see the sickness, that thing, you go down that rabbit hole of. And I think that the snare drum really is the key to every other drum on a drum kit. To me, I find the snare drum lets me know how the toms, the bass drum, the floor tom. Because to me, the most important components of the kit are the snare, the kick, and having a good ride cymbal to me, and obviously a good hi-hat. But the ride, if I had to get rid of something and just keep either the hi-hat or the ride, the ride cymbal is essential for me. But the snare drum really tells me the story of the company. You know, there's just so much there, and I think you would find that with Ludwig snare drum as well. I mean, there's so many little secrets in that drum.
Yeah. Well, I think besides a timpani, maybe, the snare drum itself is one of the oldest drums from any company, so the development and use of it has just gone and gone, so I think that's interesting. I'm the same. I've got over off the camera here, I've got a wall full of primarily Sonar snares and then some other ones I use for sessions and whatnot, but yeah, just that quality is, you know, you can tell a lot by a company by the snare drum for sure.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I have a Sonar snare drum, a very very old snare drum that's on my wall. You can't see it, but I tried to have someone actually build it into a drum for me, but the size of it's so weird that they couldn't make a hoop. Or I haven't found the right person yet. So if there's anyone out there that thinks they can do it, I would love to turn this into a drum. But it is very old. It's older than any of the drums that I have here, and it's so beautiful to look at. And it says, so there's like a triangle, and it says Sonar on it, and it's like a brass, I think an old brass drum. But they sound incredible. I probably have 10 old Sonar snare drums.
Really?
Yeah, I love the pancake snare drum. I did a video.
Yeah, it's a cool drum.
They're beautiful. I have a metal one right back here that, I can tune that thing low, really, really low, and get that low fundamental sound, whether it's recorded or live. I can crank it and get like a soprano snare drum sound, or I could put it in the middle. So that's one of those drums you could just throw in your cymbal bag. It's that skinny and just go to work with it, So they make incredible stuff. The wood snares equal to the ferro-manganese metal snare drums that they put out, and those really are my favorite ones.
Yeah, the Faro, that's a special drum. I've had a few of those over the years. I've got one of the big 8x14s, and it's unfortunate that for whatever reason that alloy is not available. But yeah, going back to the '60s, I've had a couple of those as well, like the 5x14s, and yeah, it's just there's something unique, and I think that's I don't know if it's how Sonar developed being separate of the United States. I mean, it's kind of I think if you look at drum set history, obviously Sonar was before any of the American manufacturers, but as music styles changed, some of that influence went worldwide.
That's right.
With jazz and then into swing and rock and everything else coming from primarily America. But yeah, it's kind of funny to watch that back and forth. And I think on some of the drum discussion groups, I'm sure there's arguments of who created what,
Sure.
and who inspired what. But yeah, it's I to me what I find interesting though on all those older drums, and this is unique, I think very unique to Sonar, because I've had over the years older drums from companies that are still making drums. You mentioned like Ludwig. I've had kits from the '60s and stuff years ago, and I've played newer kits, and it's not they're totally different instruments. And so I think with Sonar, it's like if I play an old kit from the '60s, which I have a few of, or if I go up to like the phonic signature era, sorry, of the late '70s, early '80s, those, though they're a different drum, they're a different shell construction. I feel like I sound like me, and I get sounds that I like out of those drums.
Those phonics are spectacular to me. Sonar Light drums and the phonic drums are. I mean, I think I have 3 different phonic kits. I have 2 teardrop kits from old ones. There's just something about the phonics. I don't know what it is. I had a swinger as well at one point.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and the bass drum, they sound incredible. And there was a time when they were using these very beautiful ferro metal hoops.
Yeah.
But I took those off and I put wooden hoops on it, and it totally changed the sound of the bass drum.
Interesting.
Completely changed it. It was night and day. I preferred the wood to the metal. The metal obviously looked nicer, but the wood just creates this whole other sonic possibility with it, much more like lower fundamentals in when you're recording. And so a lot of times I'll put up an old kit, and when I do that, it does make you play different. There is, you sort of tap into the Steve Jordan, uh, James Gatson sort of thing, where you channel a different kind of music and a different style of playing, maybe simpler or less, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. I I have the one I use probably regularly. I kind of put together a hodgepodge kit, and the bass drum on it is a 20-inch original teardrop, and it's from the early teardrops, which are actually thinner shells with a re-ring, whereas like the later teardrops were kind of more thicker, which is what the current vintage series drums are. And that bass drum, man, it just like you're saying earlier, it kind of tells you how to play it, and not in a difficult way. It's like if I'm stomping on it like I might on a 24 or 26, I would if I'm playing some big show, but at that one, man, it just like it lets me know exactly where I need to hit it, the velocity to just sing, and like you said, it kind of just puts you there, and yeah, I mean, and for me too, having those smaller diameters, like I said, I love the feel because sometimes drums feel like too hard or too soft for me, like it feels like a pillow and you just get nothing back, or it feels like it almost hurts your wrist when you hit it. Whereas with the smaller diameter, which is kind of similar to like a timpani, I guess, which I think was the original idea behind it. Like I said, it just absorbs whatever you give as long as you, I guess, give the right thing.
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, and I told Joe, this thing, it makes you play honest. It makes you
Hmm.
really figure out your rudiments and go back to basics. And if you're trying to do a passage, you can hear the flubbiness of your technique if you're not on your game. And that's sort of the thing that I described to him, because he really was like, I don't really know what you're talking about. I don't quite understand. And I'm like, so I had to figure out different ways to describe, because it is kind of weird and obscure, to describe to someone. Well, I mean, the drums sound great. Of course, they sound great, but they can sound not great, if you don't play them properly. And the thing with these drums is that they make you reassess your technique and all that stuff. And it really starts with the snare drums. The snare drums are so responsive and sensitive. Um, so yeah, I don't know that there is a better snare drum out there. They're just so good. I mean, I have just look behind me. I have so many snare drums,
Yeah.
and they all get used. Now I'm doing a lot of studio work, and sometimes I'll take them and swap them out at work, and use a different drum at work if one of them breaks, because they do eventually the wear and tear. Of 8 shows a week, 3 hours.
Yeah. It's a lot.
It's a lot of wear and tear on the drum. So.
Well, what's that kit you've got there? What's this for the fellow sonar nerds at home? What's the obviously it looks like it's like a tiger wood or something.
The tiger's inside,
Okay.
and then strata wood
Oh.
with the gloss on the outside,
Okay.
and has gold hoops, which I never ever thought in my life, oh, I'm gonna get gold hoops.
Yeah.
And they Sonar said, they were so nice, and it had been some time, like, why don't we build a kit, and so I decided to put the gold hoops on it, and that was more just a personal thing for me. It
Hmm.
certainly doesn't change the sound or affect the sound at all. It's just a looks thing. But it's a very elegant drum kit, and but it just sounds beautiful. The bass drum is beech. The floor toms are beech, and the I think all the toms are beech. My drum tech Alex is going to kill me, but I think all the toms are beech. The bass drum is beech, and the snare drums are maple. I think I went with that combination, because they give you, like, you get on their site and you can
Yeah.
pretty much build whatever you want. But I've always liked the sound of beech. I've always felt it was warm. The lower frequencies. I'm deaf in my left ear legally, so I
Oh.
have one ear left, and for me, I rely so much on that ear. And um, but yeah, so the beech and the maple are the combos for this kit. But then, of course, I have a ton of different other snare drums that are birch and whatnot. So
Yeah. Yeah. I always think the only thing I think I don't own of Sonar's shells is I only have one of the acrylic, the X-ray snare drums, but I don't have a full kit. but I've got beech, I've got birch, I've got maple. And, if people tell me they don't like a certain wood, I mean, I think beech is kind of the sonar sound in a way because that was what they made them for the longest time. But, I love like the Pro Light with the thinner maple with the rings. I have some D-Light kits as well, and I love those drums. I like the birch, the SG1s. I mean, or like the Sonar Light, like you were talking about.
Sonar Light to me takes it. Birch snare drums are very, very, the Scandinavian wood is just so beautiful. And I think that's sort of what I've gravitated the most to.
Well, great. Well, man, I know you're busy. You've got a full calendar, even though we're still in all this quarantine time of things. So, man, I really appreciate you sitting down and talking not only just Sonar drums, but just what you do in the world, and for sharing with us, where things are at with you and your family. And again, I'm so happy to hear that you guys are on the good side of all that madness.
Thank you so much, man. And thank you for having me. It's an honor to be a part of this, and any time that we can, talk about drums or music at all is a gift. So I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, again, Andres, thank you so much. For those of you at home, please stay safe, stay healthy, stay positive, and thanks for watching.